Hi, welcome to this screencast from Progress Software. Today we're going to be looking at how to scaffold Kendo UI Grid in your ASP.NET MVC projects. My name is Lohit GN. I work as a technical evangelist here in Progress. Before we start, there are certain prerequisites that you will need to have in order to follow along with this video. You'll need to have Visual Studio 2010 and later. Also, you'll need to have Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC installed on your machine. You can download Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC from www.telerik.com/ASP.NET-MVC. We have 30 days trial available, and then you can download it and then follow along with this video. I have Visual Studio 2015 on my machine. I'm going to say new project, select Telerik from the project nodes and then select web, and I'm going to select Telerik C# ASP.NET MVC application, and I'm going to name it Scaffolding Demo App. Click on OK. We will be given with a project configuration wizard. Basically here it's asking you how do you want to create this project. It knows that I have already installed UI for ASP.NET MVC version 2016.2 or the R2 release that we have, and it is asking me what kind of project type do you want. I want to select standard, and the version for the ASP.NET MVC is ASP.NET MVC 5. View engine is Razor, and in the theme I'm going to select material theme. I'm going to check the copy editor templates and then uncheck add test project for now. Click on finish. Now Visual Studio is going to go ahead and spin up the project for me. Here's Visual Studio after the project has been created. Here's the solution explorer for our project. If I expand references, you will see now we have kendo.mvc.dll. This is the DLL responsible for all the Kendo UI wrappers that we have in ASP.NET MVC. Apart from that, it would have copied the Kendo style sheets here in the content Kendo and then the version number, and here is the style sheets that we need. Also in the scripts folder, Kendo and then the version number, we'll see all the Kendo scripts here. Not only that, it has scaffolded a simple three views: index, contact and about in the home controller, and then all the shared layouts, view start, everything has been created for us. Before making any changes, let's run the project and see the output that has been generated. I'm clicking on run. Here's my browser coming up and it navigates to localhost : the port on which the project is running. Since we selected the standard template, usually you will get the home, about and then contact, the tabs, and on the home page we have the Kendo panel control being added. Here's the about page, and on the about page we have a tree view being just sampled out here. When we go to the contact page, we'll see a Kendo UI tab strip, as we call it: address, email, phone. So 3 different tabs, so you can see how neatly the animation is doing. In order to use the Kendo UI Grid scaffolder, you will need to have some sort of data context created in your project. In this example, I'm going to be using Entity Framework Data Context. When we create the standard template, the Entity Framework is not added by default. So what I will do is, I'm going to first go to npm packages and add the Entity Framework package. So let me go to browse, and here is the Entity Framework. The latest is 6.1.3, so let me click on install. NuGet is asking me if I approve. I accept. It's trying to add the Entity Framework NuGet package now. As you can see in the output, it's executing the post install, and it has successfully installed Entity Framework 6.1.3. Now in order to work with this demo, I've already set up a database. Basically I have AdventureWorks LT database set up. As you can see here, I am in the local DB projects v13. That's the local database, and then here is AdventureWorks LT. What I will do is I'm going to create an Entity Framework data model. I'm going to go to the models folder, right click, add a new item, select data, select ADO.NET entity data model, and I will say AdventureWorks data context, and then click on add. I'm going to select code first from database. You can do whichever options you want to do it. So I'm picking up code first from database. I'll say next. It's asking me what's the connection string. I'm going to set up a new connection string. I will say continue, and the server name is localDB /projects v13, and let's pick up the database AdventureWorks LT test connection succeeded. I'm going to say OK, and then it's going to save the connection settings in a web.config as AW data context. I'm OK with that. I'll say next. Now it's going to ask me what table do you need. For the example, for this demo, I'm going to just select one table, which is the product table, just to keep it very simple. So the moment I click finish, Visual Studio would go ahead and then scaffold me the product, the AdventureWorks data context, all the classes will be generated. As you can see here, I have my product.cs, which is the table that we selected, and then we have the AdventureWorks data context.cs. Now we are ready to add a Kendo UI grid through scaffolding. In order to scaffold a Kendo UI grid, right click on the controllers folder, select add, then new scaffolded item. In the add scaffold dialog, click on the common or other. If you click on MVC, you won't see our scaffolder coming into picture there. That's because that's how Visual Studio kind of segregates different things. As you can see here, our scaffolder is basically under the controller item. So if you click on controller, you will see Kendo UI scaffolder. If you click on view, you will still see Kendo UI scaffolder. Whereas in the area or web API, you won't, and not even on the MVC. If you click on the common or if you click on other, you will see Kendo UI scaffolder. Select Kendo UI scaffolder, click on add. This is this Kendo UI scaffolder dialog where you will be able to select what widget you want to scaffold. As you can see, we have MVC grid, MVC chart, MVC scheduler, MVC tree view. Also, we have the JavaScript version of these scaffolders. So here, if you see Kendo UI grid, Kendo UI chart, Kendo UI scheduler, Kendo UI tree view. Difference between UI for MVC grid versus Kendo UI grid is UI for MVC grid will be scaffolding what we call as Kendo UI grid server wrappers, whereas Kendo UI grid will be scaffolding the JavaScript version of our grid. I'm going to select UI for MVC grid now and click on add. We get to name the how this grid controller needs to be scaffolded. I'm going to name this as products controller, and the view name will be index, and I'm going to select product. If you see here, our dialog knows that there is a model object called as product, so it has selected that. If you're using a view model, you can even select a view model and then provide the view model. At this point of time, I don't have a view model, so I'm selecting directly the ADO.NET entity. And you will need to tell the context, which context to use. So I'm using the AW data context that we created earlier. Now comes the fun part. If you select grid options, you can tell how the data has to be bounded. There are 3 data source types that you can bind to. One is the AJAX, meaning any call to get the data will be made asynchronously using the AJAX calls. Server, meaning instead of making the calls on the server asynchronously, the whole markup will be generated on the server and then sent to the client side. Or you can select the web API, meaning you're not binding to an MVC action, rather you have a dedicated ASP.NET MVC web API to which you will be binding. I'm going to select AJAX and I'm going to say editable. So in the editable, I will say I need a pop-up. Then I will select operations. So I need create, update, and destroy. I will select filterable. I will select column. I will select navigatable, pageable, reorderable, scrollable, selectable. And then in the selectable, I will say single rows. Sortable, I will say allow unsort. Mode is single. I will say Excel export and PDF export. In the events, if you want to handle any events on the client side, you can pretty much select anything here. So for example, let's say you want to handle the data binding event, so you can actually create a data binding event, and then you can select the data binding event here, checkbox here, and then the scaffolder will actually write a placeholder for writing the JavaScript function. In this example, I'm not going to use that, so I've selected all the grid options, I've given the model options, so I need to say product controller here, and I'll click on add. So now what is happening is our scaffolder is going to go ahead and then scaffold a controller, scaffold the product index view. As you can see, Visual Studio is doing its job. Let's wait for a couple of seconds for the scaffolding to finish, and we have the necessary things being scaffolded. If you notice here, I have the products controller, and I have the index.cshtml here, and I have a products folder under the views. Let's take a look at the code generated in the products controller. As you can see here, it has instantiated the data context here. Here's the index method. Then here are the Ajax based methods, or these are the methods that will be called during reading through asynchronously. So this is a products read, and then notice here we have a model binder that we have as part of the Kendo UI MVC server wrappers. This understands how to intercept the query string that's coming in from the Kendo UI grid. Kendo UI grid will be passing certain parameters for page size, the page requested, the sorting, the filtering, all those information. We send it back to the server, and then this model binder knows how to intercept them and then give you a easy way of handling them. So this is the products read. Here is the products create. As you can notice here, it is a HTTP post. This is the products update. This is the product destroy, meaning the delete. And here's the Excel export, PDF export, and as you can see, all the code has been scaffolded by our scaffolder. Now let's take a look at the index.cshtml. As you can see here, it's scaffolded the Kendo UI grid, and it says that it's tightly bound, or it's type bound to scaffolding demo app.models.product. So that's the type on which the grid is working on. We have given it a name, and here are the columns that it has scaffolded. It has scaffolded all the columns that are there in the table, but I don't want to have all these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the product name. I'm going to remove the standard cost. I will keep the name, color, list, size, and weight, and I don't need the seller start date, any of these other things. And I'm going to keep the edit and destroy commands. And notice here it has put the toolbar, which is nothing but to create a new item, then Excel export, then the PDF export. Editable, remember we set it to pop up, so this is how you set up the pop-up editing. Then pageable, then navigatable, then selectable, sortable, filterable, scrollable, data source. And then in the data source, this is the interesting part. Notice here it has said that, hey, this has to be an asynchronous call, so using Ajax. The model that it will work on is so and so. The identifier, or the primary key in the entity, is product ID. For reading data, it has to invoke the products underscore read action method on the products controller. For creating, it's products underscore create. For update, it's products underscore update. For delete, it's products underscore destroy on the products controller. It's now time to run this and then see what is the output of this scaffolding. Let me click on run within my Visual Studio. I'll have my browser launched, and it will navigate to localhost:1, the port number. Here we have the page coming up, but we need to go to products endpoint. So the moment we go to the products endpoint, we will see that particular index page which was scaffolded. There we have the grid, and as you can see here, it's now waiting for the data. The data came back from the server. The loading indicator was coming up in the beginning, because when the page loads, the grid is created, then the grid goes ahead and then reads data from the server side, the action method that we had written, which is the products underscore read. As you can see here, now the grid is completely functional. So as what you are seeing here is the Pager, notice here when I click on a particular page, we still see a loading indicator coming up. That's because at any point of time we're getting only 10 rows of data, and then if I need anything else, you will have to page, and then that particular page data is brought back from the server. What you're seeing here is the sorting. So if I click on this, notice here the sort, it shows that it's currently sorted descending. I can click on it and then the sort is released. Now it's sorted ascending. I can do a filtering here. So the column, I can select which columns I need. I can click on filter, and then I can say, like, show any items. Maybe E contains mountain, and I can say filter. Now we will see any bicycles which contain mountain in their name, and then that's what we get. So we can go and then clear the filter. The moment I go and then clear the filter, you will see it goes back to starting whatever the initial state it was in. You can select a particular row, and you're seeing the list price coming up here, the size coming up here, and the weight coming up here. I can click on the edit. So notice here what happens is it follows the MVC edit template. Since the entity has a bunch of columns, but for showing the grid I just selected 5 columns, the editor template will pick up whatever the entity has, and then it is showing up all the columns that we have. Of course, I can click on a delete, and notice here I get an alert which says, are you sure you want to delete this record? I'm going to cancel it out now. So this is what the Kendo UI grid scaffolder, the feature of Kendo UI grid scaffolder helps you to quickly build a page with the Kendo UI grid with all the code that you need in minutes. You don't have to spend time, rather the scaffolder will do all your bare bone coding for you. This was a quick screencast on how to scaffold Kendo UI Grid in your ASP.NET MVC projects using Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC. Thank you for watching the screencast.